So we'll keep watching. Whoever wants to join later can keep joining, and we can get started since we have some number. So welcome, Claire. Glad to be hosting you here on behalf of Abhyodaya. Uh, for people who have joined the call, I must let all of you know that I and Claire have worked in Accenture together. And Claire started her independent coach journey, I think, a few years earlier than me. Which year was that, Claire? When did you leave Accenture?
2014, I left, and then I started my business in 2015.
Oh yeah, okay, and then I left it in 15. So, but yeah, we go long back, and the love for coaching was something which was common. Claire was managing the Center of Excellence in Accenture for coaching and taken a lot of initiatives, actually started a lot of initiatives in Accenture for coaching, which are still, I think, running if you're glued into what is happening inside. But yeah, it's such a privilege to know you, Claire, and to see your passion for coaching. So many years, it's great to see that you're still connected to coaching and so passionately contributing to the quality of coaching in industry and mentoring coaches and all that. So maybe welcome and tell us a little bit about your journey after you left Accenture, or actually your coaching journey a little bit before we get into this. I'm sure this book is actually a culmination of your journey. So welcome, over to you.
Thank you. It is a culmination of that, and it continues. My unlearning continues as I have been working towards my Master Certified Coach credential, and so there's been lots and lots of unlearning to do. Given that I've been coaching for 22 years now, so I started in 2001. I was internal at the time, so I really cut my teeth as an internal coach, and then started building my business 8 years ago. I can't count. And all the way along, I've been learning and relearning and unlearning and replacing the learning with different learning. So those people on the call, Jaya, are they at the beginning of their coaching learning journey?
So actually, if I see the names, we have all the spectrum. There are some people who have started, and some people are in the middle. Some people are very close to MCC. So actually, a lot of them.
Great. Oh, that's lovely. We've got such a spectrum. Brilliant. Because to my mind, no matter at what stage we are in the journey, there is always something to unlearn that is getting in the way of us being the most masterful coach that we can be. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So shall I dig in?
Over to you, Claire. I understand. I've read the book, and I understand it's about mindsets. And I understand about, it was a great resource to read that, and definitely it's a resource that you can, leverage and refer time and again in your journey. So I leave it to you to share the context. What made you create this book? And the common question that which is on everybody's mind, is how much time does it take to write a book? And, all those anxiety questions and everything. But
okay.
Tell us whatever you would like to tell us about the book, and what can we learn today from you?
Okay, so, well, my intention was to share some of the content from the book with everybody. And then if people want to know more about writing a book and that kind of thing, I'm also happy to talk about that, perhaps when we get towards the back end. So if I can give you a taster for some of the things that are in the book and how I came across those things in the book as a result of the mentor coaching that I do, then yeah, and I'm really happy to be interrupted. I know that everybody is on mute and has cameras off, but please don't lurk in the background. Please don't multitask. What you'll get out of this is commensurate with what you put into it. So if there is anything that I say that feels very provocative, and there will be some provocative stuff here, or anything that you think, oh, I don't quite understand that, please, everybody, either take yourself off mute, or if you feel more comfortable putting something into the text chat, then I'll stop every now and again, and I will answer any questions that come up.
Sure. So I have just a logistic thing. I have created a setting so that speakers are visible and people who have their cameras on are visible. So anybody who would like to have a conversation, please switch on your video and put yourself on mute or put it on chat and feel free to have a conversation. So I'm here in the background. Whenever you need me, I can come on the video.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again, and we shall dig in. So I hope you will engage with a few experiments today. As I said, the value of this session is not about how I show up, but it's equally about how you show up. So at this point in time, just think about whether there's anything you need to put in place right now in order to wring the most value out of this session. So take a moment to just get yourself ready and willing and able to focus for about an hour and a quarter. Perhaps take a deep breath, perhaps a stretch if you need it. I feel like I need a stretch this morning. I know it's afternoon for you guys, so yeah, you may be more tired than I am by now. Perhaps drink some water if you've got some on hand to rehydrate you. Whatever it is for you, I encourage you to be really present. So, in the course of my work as a mentor coach for the International Coaching Federation, I've observed and given feedback on over 750 hours of coaching conducted by over 200 coaches. I watch their coaching in action, either live or as a recording. And that's what distinguishes mentor coaching from supervision, by the way, supervision being self-reported. So there's nowhere to hide when we're being observed and being given feedback on our actual feedback. Those of you who are in training at the moment, that will be happening for you quite a lot in the training anyway. But it's really powerful and rich to bring ourselves back to this place of mentor coaching, being observed by a more experienced coach, to be able to understand our blind spots and to do something about it. So it's been a real privilege to support and challenge coaches as they sharpen their edge so that they can enable their thinkers to think. But if I step back for a moment to look at my definition of coaching, I talk about it being a joint endeavour to discover new thinking that energizes the thinker to change. So a joint endeavour to discover new thinking that moves the thinker forward or energizes the thinker to change. And with that new thinking as the end goal, and with the ICF competencies as the benchmark, I began to see some patterns in coaches coaching, patterns that were not particularly useful to the thinker. And these patterns seem to be habits formed as a result of things that we learned in previous lives. Not literally previous lives, but previous roles such as child, pupil, worker, partner, coach and training. And I started to get really curious. What were people saying to us at those points in our lives, whether explicitly or implicitly, that led us to these habits? People like our parents, our teachers, our peers, our managers, our culture, faith, ethnicity, coach trainers even. I noticed, for example, that our parents taught us that it was rude to interrupt. Now, I don't know in your culture whether this is the same, but in my culture, we were taught not to interrupt when adults were speaking together. And that may be so in normal conversation, that it really is rude to interrupt. But in coaching, it can be of service, to interrupt their storytelling, to check whether it is useful to them to say it out loud. And I will come back to that one in a bit, because that's one of the ones that people struggle with sometimes. I also noticed that teachers often taught us that we needed to be logical and follow a set path to solving problems, yet our much less logical intuition can play such a powerful part in bringing new insights to the thinker. These scripts served us really well at the time. And we can feel compassion towards those original intentions of those people who helped us to create those neural pathways. But it's time to rewire the things that we learned through life and work, removing those old scripts so that we can be extraordinary coaches. So I'd like to invite you into our first experiment, if I may. And I know that I can't see you, so I can't check whether you're doing this or not. But I encourage you to take part in this, partly as a way of re-energizing you mid-afternoon, but also to prove a point. So if you're able, may I ask you to please stand up? And if you're not able to stand up, you can raise your hand in lieu of standing up. But if you are able, then let's get some blood flowing by having you stand up. And as I said, I know that the temptation will be to blow this off, but indulge me for a moment in this experiment to keep you engaged and give you some insights. So if you are now standing or have your hand raised, stay standing or keep your hand up if you hesitate to interrupt their storytelling. Stay standing if you use the expression, "Tell me more about that." Stay standing if you feel that your fixer tendency or your rescuer sometimes drives the way that you coach. Stay standing if you feel awkward about introducing drawing or movement into your coaching. Stay standing if you sometimes run over time because you feel that you are so close to a breakthrough. Stay standing if you want to add value by giving recommendations. So if you're still standing, that's a lot of scripts that you are holding on to. And these are just some of the mindsets that can get in the way of our thinkers' growth. All right, you can sit down if you're not already. And I'll come back to some of those that I talked about there. But it's not rocket science. For example, using leading questions that come from our rescuer mindset, that's one that you know already. You know not to ask leading questions. And yet we are not always conscious about our habits until someone else observes us coaching and points them out. So I plant the seed with you here and now about investing in mental coaching if you're not already. So being observed as you coach and discussing how you show up and what the mindsets are that might be getting in the way of you putting skill sets into practice. This allows you to become conscious to those habits, to shine a light on your blind spots, make some small tweaks, and usually it is small tweaks in your coaching that will make a big difference to your thinkers. And by the way, I say that mental coaching is for life, not just credentialing, because there is so much growth that comes from being observed and figuring out, oh, what can I just tweak here and there? So I'm really fascinated by this idea of marginal gains that comes from the Formula One drivers playbook, where every single second counts, every microsecond counts, in fact. So I'm trying to figure out what are the marginal gains for coaching. And not to shave off time particularly, though in some instances it could be to give maximum time to the thinker to think, but it's more to create the best thinking environment for the thinker. Everything that we say or do as coaches has an impact on that thinking environment. And that's where this book comes in, describing these marginal gains, describing, first of all, the mindsets that need to shift in us before the skill sets will follow. So today we're going to focus on a few of the 83 mindsets that are in the book. And I hope that it might encourage you to buy the book as a result, to find out what the other 83 mindsets are. I'm going to stop there for a moment and see what questions are coming up before I look at things that our parents taught us that we need to unlearn in order to be a great coach. So anything coming into the text chat? I can't actually see the text chat at the moment. I'm going to stop my share for a moment, see if there's anything there. Okay, does anybody want to ask anything? All right, I'm taking that as a no, so I'm going to keep going, but please do ask questions at any point, as I said, partly to keep yourself engaged as well. So, things that our parents taught us that we need to unlearn in order to be a great coach. One thing that they taught us is that it's rude to interrupt. And I've mentioned that one already. This had merit because we needed as children to learn that not everything centers around us and our universe. And when adults are in conversation, we needed to learn to listen and to bide our time before adding our thoughts. And actually, children are often actually not part of the conversation, and their interruptions tend to be about something completely different to the conversation at hand. So it was an important lesson to learn at the time. Do not interrupt other people's flow with something completely different. When we become coaches, we learn to listen and pay attention to what our thinker says. And this is a really good habit to learn in the main. This is perhaps the first time that they have been so exquisitely listened to, and this makes them feel valued and valuable. They know they have someone on their side who fully gets them. But the trouble is, we can sometimes over listen. If they are telling us things that they already know, the story, the chronology, the way they have already explained it to their friend or their family, then they're gaining nothing new by saying it to us. They know it already. So our job, because it's about getting them to new thinking and not go over old ground, is to believe that it might be okay to interrupt, to check in with them. We don't need them to fill us in on all the context, because our job is not to solve it for them. So we're not there in a diagnostic role, needing to understand every detail. So instead of believing it's rude to interrupt, we need to believe that interrupting can enable them to move away from known thinking towards new thinking. Now, I'm not making this a rule. There is a time and a place, and we need to use our intuition around when to interrupt and how to interrupt. But we do need to have this different mindset in order to feel okay, and not have our mother or our father or our carer's voice in our head saying, don't interrupt because it's rude, let them finish their sentence. Let them finish their story, which could take half an hour, let's face it. So I'm going to encourage you to write down a phrase that you might use to interrupt the person that you're working with in the way that feels authentic to you. I'm going to ask you to put it in the text chat so that everybody can learn from what everybody else is thinking. So, what would you say as a sentence to interrupt? Please put that in the text chat now. Can I ask you a quick question here? Yeah. So you're asking for permission. Can I? Yeah. I probably wouldn't say quick question, because it's actually that diminishes the question. May I ask a question? Yeah. What are you missing to focus on here? Yeah. Can I make my point? That's a tricky one, because this isn't about your point. There is, yes, we're there to ask them questions. We're not there to actually make a point. That, having said that, that might be a language thing, I'm thinking. But there's a real subtlety in language that, is a real difference between making your point and asking them to make their point, for example. So the interruption might be something like, so what's the essence of what you are saying here, to get them to the point? I would like to understand here. So I wouldn't say I would like to understand, because it's not about me understanding, and actually that can invite more storytelling. So I might reframe that though as, what do you understand from this context? So you're asking them all the time. Would it be okay if I shared something that I'm observing? Yeah. So asking permission to share an observation. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Can I ask something? Yeah. Now, if you have contracted at the beginning of the session for interrupting, you don't actually need to say that sorry to interrupt you piece. You can simply say, may I interrupt you at this point? So in the session contract, especially if you know that they're a talker and a storyteller, ask for permission at that point. When you're talking about how should we do this work together, ask them, may I have your permission to interrupt you in service of new thinking? Then that means that when you actually come in to interrupt, you don't need to say sorry to interrupt you. You just do it. They will be more prepared for it. Nidhi says, what's the real challenge here? Yeah. That sounds like a Michael Bungay Stanier type of question. He gets really into the nub of what is it we're working on here. Yeah, great question. Sanjay, what if? I'm not sure about that one, because that sounds like it might be followed by a suggestion. But I'm not sure quite how you might follow that one on, Sanjay. But good. What you're seeing here is that there is no one way to interrupt. There are multiple ways to put this into your language. But all the time be thinking about, how can I do this such that it's non-directive and it's placing the onus back on them to talk about the essence of this story, or the what's the key message that you are drawing from this story, you might ask, for example. Or if you could sum this up in one sentence, what would you say? Yeah. Great, thank you for playing along and coming up with some great examples. Now, this is the one that I do get the most questions about and the most pushback from, especially if you've read Nancy Klein's work, and her latest book is about not interrupting at all. I have a different point of view about that, as you can see from this. But I wonder if there are any questions coming up for anybody at this point that you want to stop me and push back, or have a challenge. Anything coming through? I can't see anything on the text chat. Okay, I'm going to keep going then. And as I say, if at any point you want to challenge anything I say, I am up for it, absolutely up for it. So the next thing that our parents may have taught us is to try our hardest. Again, I know this is true in my culture, and I suspect it's true in the Indian culture. Wanting us to try hard at school. Some also would have encouraged perfection and top marks. And whilst that was important at school and then at work, trying hard as a coach can actually get in the way of our partnership with our thinker. So the key word here is partnership. Remember, I said that coaching is a joint endeavor to discover new thinking that moves the thinker forward. And within that joint endeavor, the coach has responsibility for holding the process that enables the thinking to happen. The thinker has responsibility for thinking for themselves and moving forward. And too often I notice that the coach takes too much responsibility on their shoulders for pushing the thinker forwards. They're trying too hard. They've still got this mindset that they developed in childhood. Perhaps they're looking for the perfect question. And hint, there isn't such a thing as a perfect question. Or they're feeling the pressure to drive to a solution by the end of the session, or leading where the session goes, or taking the burden of thinking that should be firmly in the thinker's court. And the clue is in the title, thinker. The harder the coach works, the less hard our thinker will think. So the mindset that is needed is very different to trying hard oneself. It's encouraging the thinker to work hard, to think hard. Nobody ever promised that coaching was an easy option. It really isn't. Coaching requires effort on the part of the thinker, and it requires their full participation. It requires them to take responsibility for the hard work of thinking, delving underneath the surface, going beyond the obvious. We're asking the questions that help them to delve underneath the surface and to go beyond the obvious, but we're not doing that work for them. So as a coach, we can help them to help themselves by making them do the work. So what does that look like or sound like to encourage them to do the work? Well, first and foremost, asking really good contracting questions at the beginning of every single session. And I'm talking about small C contracting here, not the big C contracting that you will do at the beginning of a coaching program. But for every session, we need to be contracting well, not letting them off the hook with something woolly or a request that you decide for them based on what others have brought to coaching in the past. So we spend time at the beginning getting the question for the session really clear before moving on. Just as Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend the first 55 minutes determining the proper question to ask. For once I know the proper question, I could solve the problem in less than 5 minutes. That's why we spend so long on contracting in a session, to enable them to think hard about what is it they truly desire from this time that we have together with them. And then When you don't know in the middle of a session where this conversation is going, which, by the way, is a good thing to not know, then recontract rather than taking responsibility for deciding the direction that you both take. And that might sound something like, what do you know now that you didn't know at the beginning? Once they've answered that question, so with that in mind, where do we need to explore next? So this recontracting keeps the responsibility with the thinker. It's their choice to decide which direction it goes. It's not about us figuring that out. It's about them figuring it out. And these kinds of questions keep us out of the content and out of driving to solution. You may think that that is part of your role to get to a solution to a problem or opportunity that the thinker has brought. But oftentimes driving too hard and too fast can lead to transactional actions coming out of the coaching that just don't address the underlying needs of the person. So what would it be like if you didn't try so hard? How might you hand the reins over to them? Something worth thinking about. So here's a third thing that our parents taught us: not to be selfish and to be the caregiver. Now, you know this already. You know to pay attention to your own self-care so that you have the capacity to work with others. You know to put your own oxygen mask on first. You know that. It's common sense, but is it common practice? No, it tends not to be. So if you were to pause for a moment and ask yourself how much you practice self-care, I wonder how you would rate yourself. So these are just 3 of the, I think there's 14 mindsets that we learn from our parents that we need to unlearn in order to be a great coach. I'm going to stop for a moment, see what questions we have. Anything that anybody wishes to ask at this point? Or any comments or any observations, just so that I know what's going on in your heads right now would be really useful. Questions, comments, observations. Type them into text chat if you wish, or open up your microphone if you prefer. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question instead then that asks you, what do you know now that you did not know at the beginning of this session half an hour ago? What have you learned? What are you taking away? Oops, that was a multiple question. So I'm going back to it. What do you know now that you didn't know at the beginning of this session? Nidhi, thank you for your question. As a coach, do you identify your way of coaching to be different than the ICF, and are you comfortable with it? No, this is absolutely aligned with the ICF, what I'm talking about. Although you will see one of the PCC markers says that there has to be a justified reason for interrupting. But as long as there is a reason for interrupting, a contracted reason for interrupting, then you can interrupt. That's what it says. That's what the ICF says, for example. So everything I'm talking about is totally steeped in ICF. All of the mentor coaching I do uses the ICF markers, the PCC markers, as the benchmark. So everything that I'm saying here is very aligned with the non-directive way of coaching of the ICF. And yes, I am very comfortable with it. It's in my bones. Yeah, thanks for that question, Andy. So Bhavna, you're noticing that these mindsets are woven so deep into our identity that stepping away seems so tough. Yeah, absolutely, because they run through us, right through the center of us, the core of us. It's like a void that needs another way of thinking to take its place. How does one bridge the gap? Really great question. So we need to notice the mindset that's getting in the way first. Of course, that's the first thing we need to do. Then we need to decide, do I want to change that mindset? If my answer to that is yes, because I see that if I change my mindset, I would actually be able to offer better coaching, because the skill set that follows it would be more conducive to more masterful coaching on behalf of the people that I work with. That's the first step, recognizing the mindset that's getting in the way. Do I choose to make some changes to this mindset? If so, what's the mindset I wish to replace it with? And yes, nobody ever said that mindset changes were easy. And actually, that's what we're doing with the people that we work with all the time, is helping them to look at their mindsets. So we need to do that for ourselves as well. Let's look at our own mindsets. Thanks, Bhavna. A really great question. Ramya has learned that interrupting is okay in coaching. Yes, it is, as long as we ask permission at the beginning, when we're at the beginning of a session, and as long as it is in service of new thinking. So if they're already in new thinking, and you can tell that they are in new thinking because they will be looking around the room rather than looking directly at you, they'll be trying to access it. It's as though that new thinking is up here somewhere, or maybe down here. It's very rarely in front of them. So if you notice that they're looking around the room, and if you notice that their pace has slowed down, so they're really trying hard to find the words to describe what it is that's going on for them, that is how you recognize new thinking. Do not ever interrupt new thinking, because that would be bad. That's what you want to encourage. So in those times, you need silence to allow them to keep accessing, keep getting deeper. Sometimes silence is the best question to get them to peel that onion a bit more. So interrupting is okay in coaching if they are in storytelling mode and filling you in. But interrupt and ask them whether it's useful to them, because it may be that this is the first time that they've told this story out loud, and some people do need to say it out loud in order to be able to join the dots. So ask them how useful it is to go over this story. Yeah, lovely. Nafisa has learned to make the coachee do the work of hard thinking. Yes, yes. Planning the right questions becomes a challenge. Yeah, and we can't actually plan those questions because they need to come up in the moment. A powerful question can never be asked again because it is the perfect question in that moment, given what they have just said. So I'll give you an example. I posted this on LinkedIn last week. I asked somebody, so she had just said something about feeling sick. And I said, sorry, this is going to be a bit gross. I said, so what would be in the sick? If you sicked it up, what would be in the sick? Now, I could never ask that question ever again. It would never be contextual. It could only be asked that one time. So we can't ever plan up front what the right questions are going to be. We need to trust ourselves that the question will come up in the moment, depending on what they just said in that last moment. What did they say that we might help them to explore further? It's not about me exploring that further, it's helping them to explore it further, helping them to peel the onion and to go deeper underneath the surface. Wonderful, thank you. This is great learning. All right, so let's move into mindsets that we learned from school. So I'm kind of assuming that school for you was similar to school for us here, in that your teachers probably taught you that you needed to finish what you started, handing in your complete homework on time. And you would get into trouble if you did not do that. So this often drives us in later life to finish what we started. So, for example, it's taken me many years to put down a book and not finish that book if it wasn't interesting or captivating. Somehow I felt compelled to read the whole of the book, even though I thought it was rubbish. And that was a mindset thing going on for me. Finish what I started. And as a result, we have a tendency in coaching to want to finish off everything in a coaching session. Completeness is a draw. Getting to a conclusion is seductive. Finding solutions is irresistible. A belief that we only have so much time together and we must finish everything in that time slot, it lures us to quicken the pace and get to the end. And as coaches, we often fall into the trap of driving to the finish line, feeling as though it's our responsibility to cover everything that they said they wanted at the beginning of the session. And we inadvertently push and lead and direct towards an outcome that meets their original session contract. That means that we miss or skip over exploration that could be really useful to them and more transformational for them. We are also making an assumption that we need to get as far as we can when we are together in coaching, and that they can't make any further progress on their own in between coaching sessions. Really? That's very egotistical if we think that they can only make progress when we are together. But the thing is, once we've helped them to make some progress, that progress begets more progress. You may have come across the work of Teresa Amabile and Steve Kramer, who found that any progress is good progress because people feel motivated to carry on when they recognize that they have made progress, even small progress. So we're enabling them to break the stalemate that they find themselves in. So that's the mindset we need to have, is that we help them to make any progress, breaking the stalemate, not resolving everything. So that's our aim. Imagine a beaver dam, if you will. And if we pull out one stick from a beaver dam, we'll allow a trickle of water through the dam. That trickle will start to push out more sticks. And as each stick floats away downstream, there's another gap for a little more water, and then a little more water, until the water has washed away the whole section of the dam. And that's how we should approach coaching, as though our job in this session is to help our thinker to remove one stick from the dam. Because if they can remove that one stick, then they will continue to remove obstacles after the coaching is over, because progress begets progress. We must trust that once they have made any progress in the session, they will continue to make progress outside of it without us. They are adults, they are not children. They may need us for that first stick to break the stalemate, but they don't need us for the whole dam. We don't need to remove the whole dam or even half of it in a session for them to get great value out of that session. So I'd like to invite you into a visualization exercise, if I may. And again, if you're able, I'll invite you to stand and move away from your computer for a moment, as long as you can hear me. It depends whether you're tethered on earbuds, I guess, but if you're not tethered and you can still hear me, I'll invite you to move somewhere else in the room so that you can stand in just a different place and give yourself a different perspective as I help you through this visualization. If you are tethered to your laptop, if you're able to stand anyway, that would be useful for this visualization exercise. So I'd like to invite you to perhaps close your eyes, if that feels comfortable to you, and to get yourself really grounded, so 2 feet firmly on the ground. And by the way, if you're not able to stand, then simply place your feet square to the ground, earth your feet, and sit up tall as opposed to stand up tall. And take 3 beautifully enriching deep breaths. And now I'll invite you to imagine yourself with one of your clients, a thinker with whom you are working. Somebody, it might be a current person that you're working with or past. Just bring them to mind for a moment. And imagine that you are helping them to make 1 stick's worth of progress. You are supporting them to break the stalemate. Imagine that you really believe that that is your job as a coach. It is to let go of needing to finish everything, but rather to support them to make any progress at all, knowing that that progress will enable them to make more progress outside of the session, because you will have broken that stalemate with them. They will have broken the stalemate. They will have figured out the first stick that needs pulling out of the beaver dam. Really get yourself in this place of believing and sensing that it's possible to make progress in a session that isn't about going the whole way. It's about unlocking something for them. It's about enabling them to feel their agency to carry on making progress outside of the session when you're not there. You're letting go of this trying hard that we talked about earlier. So breathe that in. Really visualize yourself in that space. And I'll invite you to come and sit back down again and to put in the text chat, what's 1 word that describes how you're feeling right here, right now, as a result of that visualization? Just 1 word. How are you feeling? And those who are listening to the recording, I hope you didn't skip over that visualization. You will see in a moment, as you see some of these words coming in, how powerful it can be to visualize yourself really believing that any progress is good progress. So Bhavna, you're saying you feel free. Yeah. Thank you. What other words or feelings are coming up for any of you? Peaceful. Thank you, Shaylee. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Ramya, feeling happy and proud to help my client break the knot. Yeah, because isn't that what it's about? Is unpicking that ball of wool that's got knotted inside of the head. And if we can help them to just, unknot 1 knot. Happy. Yeah, thank you. Any other words that are coming up for you? I feel peaceful just having talked it through. Yeah, thank you. So I hope that encourages you to let go of this need to finish everything that you started. That is not the role of the coach. It's not, oh, we had content coming in there as well. Thank you. All right, other things that school taught us. More is more. So many moons ago, when I went to Sunday school, my favourite time of year was when we were given an Easter project. And we were tasked with telling a story from the Bible in our own words. And I used to love putting my all into these projects, adding 2D pictures. You know, imagine lambs made of cotton wool, for example. And those got me extra marks for my project. More was always more, and I was encouraged to go bigger and better each year by those extra marks. But that's not the case in coaching. When I observe coaches, I often hear them parroting back everything that they heard, when that just gets in the thinker's way, as it takes their thinking space. I hear stacked questions because the coach doesn't think the first one was clear enough, when in fact it was perfectly clear. In essence, I hear coaches taking space that they don't need to take because they believe that they need to insert more of themselves, but they don't need to. You do not need to. So I encourage you to listen back to your coaching. So record as much as you can and listen back to it and see how much you insert yourself. Some transcript services like otter.ai will tell you the percentage that you speak versus the percentage that the thinker speaks. And that might be a real eye-opener to you to see what is the balance of who speaks more, and where do you think it should be. And there is no hard and fast rule. But, you know, if you think of is it Pareto's law, 80-20? That's probably roughly what we should be aiming for. As I say, that's not a rule, but if you're inserting yourself much more than 30-35%, then start questioning, how might I make my questions more succinct? Or how might I get out of the way more? Those kinds of things. And we have another one where we're taught that we need to understand everything. That is our job as pupils, is to understand. But it might seem counterintuitive, but I don't need to understand what my thinker is, or the person I'm working with is talking about. I have coached many, many people who talk in language that is unfamiliar to me. So jargon or acronyms from their industry or specialism. And I don't know the meaning of those, but I don't need to know the meaning of them as long as they know the meaning of them. If I stop them with a question that enabled me to understand something that they already understand, then I would be taking time away from their new thinking. So I don't understand this. I need to realize that I don't need to understand as long as they do. I even know one coach who has coached in English with a translator, but the translator only translated from English into the foreign language, not the other way around. So the coach did not understand anything that the thinker said, but could still ask questions that moved the thinker's thinking forward. So given that we are not there to come up with solutions for them, we do not need all the detail to enable them to get there for themselves. So I'm going to stop again and see what questions are coming in about things we learned from school. So Binay, can you please share the two tools name which calculates the percentage? Yeah, so transcript services like otter.ai. Oh yes, I can share, you've already put it in. Thank you for putting that in. Other transcript services are available, and I am sure others are also following suit with the percentage. But yes, it's really, really useful to transcribe and then to see what the percentages are. Other questions or comments that you would like to pose? curiosity is a big ask of coaches. Then the last point. Bhavna, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying there. Oh, of I must understand this. Really good question. So curiosity is on the thinker's behalf. It's to enable them to be curious about their stuff rather than us being curious. I think there's a difference between curiosity and nosiness. Nosiness is about me understanding it. Curiosity is about enabling them to understand it. So yes, that's a really good point, Bhavna. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So how are we doing? So we have about a quarter of an hour to play with. So I'm going to give you a choice. We can either look at things that we learned from work that we need to unlearn to be a great coach, or we can look at things that we learned from our coach training that we need to unlearn to be a great coach. So can I ask for a show of hands? Which would you prefer? Things we learned from work or things we learned from our coach training that we need to learn? Bhavna says coach training for sure. Okay, what other votes do we have? And while those votes are coming in, Binay, you have asked how you take curiosity and inquisitiveness. Are they the same in coaching? Really good question. So if I take that word inquisitiveness, I might, you know how you have inquisitions, the Spanish Inquisition. What was that about? I see an inquisition as it's a bit like my mum. She asks me lots of closed questions and it feels like an inquisition. It feels like she's trying to pin me down, but closed questions, as we all know as coaches, do not enable me to open up and to give her more detail. It just prompts me to give her the short answer. So I don't know whether that's the textbook answer of the difference between curiosity and inquisitiveness, but that's how I see the difference. That an inquisition can feel more like an interview, and that's not what we're doing here in coaching. Maybe it's worth looking those two up in the dictionary and seeing what the dictionary says about the difference. But although dictionary definitions are not always how we might define things in coaching. But yeah. So Billy, for me, inquisitiveness is unduly curious about the affairs of others or prying. Yeah, could be. Although sometimes we do need to lean in to things that might have been taboo in the past. So we do need to lean into mental health, questions of mental health, if we're noticing something that's not right, or maybe some signs or signals about a person's mental health. We mustn't be like we were in olden times and not check in with them. We need to be human when it comes to something like mental health, or when it comes to menopause, for example. If we're working with somebody, a woman in their late 40s, early 50s, and they're starting to talk about, maybe they make a throwaway remark about the menopause. It shouldn't be throwaway. It may, they've probably mentioned it for a reason, because it's getting in the way of them doing some really great thinking, because they'll be having brain fog. So, let's not have any taboo subjects in coaching, I think is what I'm saying. But we're not asking for our own curiosity. We're asking for theirs to help them to figure out where they want to go. So I'm seeing that we have 2 votes for coach training. So coach training it is then. If nobody else puts up their hand to say what you'd like, so I'm going to skip over these and go to coach training. So this may or may not be true of your coach training with Jaya and her team. But many times coach training schools teach us implicitly, I think, not explicitly, to sit and talk as we coach, when actually we've learned that sitting still can in itself cause stuckness. The lack of physiological movement can lead to a lack of forward movement in thinking. And this is especially true if the thinker is in the same seat that they sit in their normal work, which is the place they got stuck in the first place. So, that's why I invited you out of your seat to do that visualization somewhere else. Because if you try and do it in the same seat you're always in, it's actually hard to get unstuck from old mindsets. So movement is really useful in coaching. Also, talking alone does not necessarily tap into the thinker's multitude of other intelligences, like drawing, for example. Drawing can get to so much so quickly, or using artifacts out in front of them to represent different parts of a system, and then to see that system out in front of them. It's a shortcut. It gets to that. Oh my goodness, I had never thought about that before until I see it out there in front of me. So we need to tap into those other senses. Lots of people, I don't know how it is for you over there, but here lots of people are now introducing walking coaching. There is some research that shows that people's creative output increases by an average of 60% when walking. That's 60% when walking. So that's an astounding difference, and suggests that actually we should all walk every time we are coaching, because we're going to create those, it's going to be those creative juices flowing to help a person to get unstuck and to break that stalemate that we talked about. So think about how can you tap into all of their senses to access new thinking. What's their body's wisdom, for example? So access that bodily stuff. I was with somebody yesterday and she said she was feeling tight in her chest. So I asked her, so what would your chest say to you right now if it could talk? So she went, she started to listen to her chest rather than her head. It gets to so much more if we can access those other parts of our wisdom. Our coach training has often also taught us to say, tell me more. Now, we've said we don't want storytelling in coaching because it's not getting to new thinking. Whenever you say, tell me more, you are encouraging more storytelling. Tell me more about that. Fill me in on the story. Fill me in on the context is what you're essentially saying. And that's not what coaching is about. So it might be better to say something like, what does that mean to you? Rather than tell me more, because actually the reason you're saying tell me more is because you want them to go deeper. But usually when you say tell me more, is they stay on the surface level rather than going deeper. So asking a question, what does that mean to you, helps them to go deeper instead of staying at that surface level. Our coach training also often taught us, not always, that we start from the end of the last session. In other words, we ask them, what have you done since last time? Or we go back to our notes as preparation for this session, but actually they are a different person now. It may only have been a week ago that we worked with them, or it may be a month, however long, there has been a period of time in between. They are not the person who left coaching the last time we were together at the end of that session. So if they want to report back, that's fine. But I I wouldn't personally ever ask them, so tell me about what you've done since last time, because it's very parent-child. It's like a teacher asking the pupil to tell them about their homework, and then there might be some shame if the person didn't do the things that they said they were going to do. Whereas if we think that they are a different person now, actually we ask the question, what would you like to work on today? And it's their choice. If they wish to report back, they can. So maybe it's, what have you learned since the last time we met? What have you learned about yourself the last time, since the last time we met? And that will actually get them going deeper rather than it simply being a report back. So as we come into our last 7 minutes, we've covered all of these. We haven't covered the work ones, but what I've tried to do is give you a flavor of these mindsets that I've discovered and written up in the book, so that you can get a sense of the kinds of things that you might wish to do some work on. But let me ask if there's any other questions coming up from what I said about coach training. Vinny, thank you. I see you concurred that walking makes you think better too. Yeah. So any other questions or comments? Okay, while you're thinking, I'm going to bring up. So these are my 2 books. The Transformational Coach is the one that we've been talking about today. If you have your phone with you, you can take out the camera and you can place it over the QR code, and it will take you straight into Amazon. Actually, it will take you to amazon.co.uk. So you may need to figure out how to get into. I'm assuming there's an Indian Amazon, but that is a big assumption. I do not know that. But if there isn't, let's figure out a way to get the book to you somehow if you are interested. Okay, so what have we got? Ah, thank you, Binay. There is an Amazon India, so you should be able to order it from Amazon in India. So we have 4 minutes left for any questions that anybody has got. Otherwise, I will simply say that, you know, these observations came out of the mentor coaching that I've been doing over the past 8 years or so, observing coaches as they coach and providing them with feedback against a benchmark set of competencies, the ICF competencies, PCC ones. So I encourage all of you to invest in mentor coaching, as alongside supervision. The 2 go hand in hand. They give you something different, but they are absolutely the most high impact, individualized investments in yourself as a coach. Oh, thank you, Binay, for gifting my book to somebody else. That's lovely. I appreciate that. And thank you, Shaylee, for putting the link up there to buy the book from the Indian Amazon. I appreciate you doing that. Perfect. So you have Jaya, you have all sorts of other people around you who can support you with coaching, mentor coaching, supervision. So do approach them with any more questions you have. But feel free also, if you want to link in with me on LinkedIn, I am always open to more connections, because I post lots of stuff about the content from the book. I post, so I write blogs about how to help the thinker to think better, etc., etc. Binay, thank you. Can I talk a bit about the mentor coaching book? Yes, I can. So it's in 2 sections. The first section is how to make what is mentor coaching as distinct from what is supervision, and how to make the most of mentor coaching when you are being mentor coached. And then the second section is for people who wish to be mentor coaches for the benefit of other coaches, and how to go about being a mentor coach. And I also have training on how to be a mentor coach as well. So yeah, if that's useful to you, please buy that book too. Lovely. Well, I think we should call it a wrap. Jaya, is there anything you wish to say by way of closing out?
So I would say thank you, Claire. I see that the book talks about 7 mindsets, and out of that, I think you've covered 3 as a sample. Very, very useful resource for coaches to develop their own thinking and unlearning. So I do encourage everybody to have a look at that. And yeah, it was very useful conversation, I would say. And I see engagement on the chat. So it seems coaches have taken something out of it for sure.
Good. Yes. Well, maybe in our final minute, we can ask everybody to type in, what is that one thing that you are taking away from today? That would be a useful way to finish this off. So what are you each taking away? Now, of course, it takes ages for people to type.
Yeah. Let them. Helping knowing what to unlearn. Yeah, that's a good perspective, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of this is about unlearning rather than new learning, replacing old mindset, new mindsets. Yeah,
absolutely. And do you want to talk about how this ties into the second competency of mindset, coaching mindset?
Oh yeah, really good point. So, well, first of all, the coaching mindset competency talks about us investing in our own self-awareness and development as a coach. So mentor coaching, supervision, reflective practice, those are all really important. But understanding our mindset, I mean, that is the work of mastery, is knowing ourselves and continually being on this path of discovery about who am I, how do I show up in coaching, how do I bring the best of who I am into this coaching without inserting my own stuff, if that makes sense. So yes, that would be the connection I would make to that competency. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Interruption is useful. Okay.
We have some intrigue. That's good.
Intrigued.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was wonderful, Claire. Thank you for taking our time and sharing the content from the book. It's really helpful. And we will try to use, to basically share the perspective with the community so that people can look at the book and learn from it.
Lovely.
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's been lovely to work with you. Thanks, Jaya, for inviting me.
Thank you, Claire. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.